Mateo County. This is an incredible turnout. Let's just take a look around the room and note all of the people that came together that care about climate resilience in our county. Let's just give all of you a round of applause for being here. Thank you. My name is Georgia Farouk, and I am the Executive Director of Thrive, which is the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County. And on behalf of the entire host committee, which includes Climate Resilient Communities, Nuestra Casa, Rise South City, and Thrive, we welcome you to this exciting day. As you can see from your detailed agendas, there's not a lack of opportunity to engage in the topics. So many amazing sessions that are here for you to participate in. I noted our co-hosts because this is really an example of 4 organizations that have committed to working together in partnership, in equal partnership, over the course of the last 2 years. And I think that is something of note. In this day where we talk a lot about collaboration and strategic alliances, we are really living that out. And it isn't always an easy road to work in partnership, and I think we've learned so much along the way. And I just want to shine a light on our incredible partners. Once again, I want to name them, and I want that you are going to be hearing from them today, but please know that Climate Resilient Communities, please stand. Climate Resilient Communities, Nuestra Casa, Rise South City, so we can acknowledge you. We have put this together with you here today. Thank you. We would like to start the day with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we convene today on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone tribes, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. As organizations that are dedicated to advancing equity, practicing empathy, and understanding each other's differences, we aspire to show appreciation, respect, and concern for all connected to this land. We also acknowledge our committed relationship to indigenous peoples, and we gratefully recognize our history. With that, I'd like to invite Greg Castro, who is Culture Director of the Association of the Ramaytush Ohlone, to join us for a welcome and a brief prayer and song. Thank you.
Are we all coffeed up yet? Hirshatuhi, greetings. My name is Greg Castro. I'm Totral Slinin, Rumson, and Ramaytush Ohlone, and I'm the Culture Director for the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone. Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you for coming. Obviously, this is a really important topic to all of us. It certainly is to our people. The Ramaytush Ohlone were the first victims of genocide and gentrification in this area. So most of our people actually were pushed out of this area quite a while ago. But we still have connections here. I've lived all my life in San Jose, between my Ramaytush, San Francisco Peninsula, and Rumson, Monterey Bay area heritages, and have seen the changes in our peninsula from the time I was born, when I was literally living in the remnants of an orchard and worked in those orchards up into the 70s, when they started to disappear and lots of pavement, asphalt, and buildings showed up, to where there's virtually no orchards left in San Jose. That change is reflected pretty much in much of the peninsula around the bay, with obvious effects. And that's where we're going to start today. I think that's what we're going to talk about. How can we manage that? Probably can't undo it. I don't imagine them going around tearing up the freeways. But there's still things we can do. And the history of indigenous people, especially in California, with the devastation over after being here for at least 15,000 years. And in the last 250 years, the devastation we've suffered, especially the 100-year period from the beginning of the missions to statehood and shortly after. We know how it is to survive. We know how it is to be in danger, how it is to be desperate. And we know how to utilize the resources we have, meager as they might be, to continue to fulfill our sacred obligation that we believe we have from Creator, to take care of the land that took care of us and gave birth to us, and also all the living things on it. Now, my ancestors probably didn't imagine this crowd 250 years ago, but you are human beings who are living on our land, so our obligation extends to you as well, that we take care of you. And that's a pretty wide village, and it extends beyond human beings to every living thing, and to us, everything out there is a living thing. It's a relative. So we'll talk about that more perhaps when I'm on my panel. I'd like to start off with a song, and there's so little of our culture that we don't have any rituals or ceremonies or stories left. So I borrow some of the culture from my other heritage from Rumsen land, and this is what I call the folk song. And I use it, it's not too foggy in here right now, but it's also to clear our fog, to clear our minds and our hearts and our spirits, and if necessary, our ears, so that we can hear what's being said. To accept it in an open mind, and then our responsibility is to take that knowledge and use it within our moral ethical framework as we feel appropriate. We don't make people do anything. We suggest they might do something. And that's kind of what we're here for today. Pointing out the things we see around us, how the world is changing, and how we can adapt to it and perhaps reverse some of the ill effects of our civilization. So here's the fog song. Arapa chitihuan wasiahim. 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 Oh. Hi, it's Marikan. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Now we are going to move into some spoken word. We are thrilled to have here with us today in the front, Jacob Burgess, who is a passionate and dedicated community leader and spoken word artist. He's worked with a lot of the organizations that we're so familiar with, like Job Train, One East Palo Alto, and so many more. And he believes his purpose is helping guide his peers and the people around him to discover their purpose and how their voice, along with action, can change the environment around them. So we thought we have a lot to learn from you today, and we welcome you here to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. If y'all are happy to be alive and breathing, can I get some snaps this morning? There we go. Thank you so much. So my name is Jacob Burgess. I'm a spoken word activist from East Palo Alto, California. Yeah, I'll make some noise for EPA, you feel me? But I have a couple pieces that I want to share with y'all. So without any further ado, I'm going to get into these pieces. I am the black and brown youth that run and play through our streets. I am East Palo Alto, baby, don't forget the E. I am the gardens, that's the G. Flowers label all the streets. I am your brother up the block. Our mission keeps our souls in sync. I am the gardener here to garner my community's needs. Like more opportunities for the kings and queens that look like me, that look like you. Needs like more resources for the youth, more gyms so we could hoop, rec centers with free food and career opportunities, street cleanups and open mics too. I am that kid from a vicious system that broke out, brave enough to choose a different route. I could have been like my peers when things went south, but the God I serve just wouldn't allow it. And now I am that peace that you feel when you finally found him. I am that faith of a mustard seed that lifts up mountains. I am the water in the fountain of youth that keeps even the eldest elder spirit in tune. I am the elephant, I am the mammoth, and I am the mastodon swinging in the room. I am that light that shines bright behind the truth. And if you look into the mirror with your conscience clear, if you really did your best to feel and hear me, then you will see that I am you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So this next piece, as actually I really am honored to be able to present this piece here. When I spoke to Miss Camille, she let me know that we're here talking about climate change, we're talking about community resilience, and we're talking about working together to change not only our community, but the world that we live in as a whole. So this next piece I wrote specifically for this event. It's called "The Temperature is Rising." The temperatures are rising. Yes, things are heating up. Our societies and ecosystems both need a tender touch. Our resources are dying. Our seas are overflowing. It's a lack of unified vision that's keeping us from growing. A lack of proper education is keeping us from knowing that we must find change soon before this earth goes up in smoke. Greenhouse gases daily getting more potent. Systems are strategically corrupted so our spirits will be broken. Soot-covered hands slave all day in factories for tokens, shooting toxins into the air we breathe while ripping our ozone open. The temperatures are rising. The cold truth has been unfrozen, fading, just like glaciers fading slowly in the ocean. And as government lies rise to the surface like lifeless fish that the ocean spits up, you can still hear the whispers of children through vivid skies, wishing on shooting stars for a brighter tomorrow. A tomorrow where there isn't unnecessary pain and sorrow. A tomorrow where love's the supreme leader and everyone follows. A tomorrow where we have storehouses of hope for our neighbor's neighbor to borrow. A tomorrow that isn't drowning in the decisions of yesterday. Y'all, the temperature is rising. This climate never stops changing. Time continues to fly by, but we're so stuck in our ways. Still dividing and degrading others due to their race. Still perverting and corrupting what's supposed to be safe spaces. Still pimping out Mama Earth so the rich keep getting paid. As the temperature keeps rising, as the temperatures keep rising, y'all, it's getting hotter by the day. we must build our faith that builds resistance, and that itself paves the way. We all must join together in how we work and how we pray to cool this climate down before this whole world goes ablaze. Thank you.
I am just so moved, Jacob, that you composed that poem for this moment today, and you brought up so many of the themes that we're going to be talking about today, not just the temperature rising, which we're all globally acutely aware of, but the impact on children, on even being able to see the stars in the sky. And so thank you so much for that wonderful entry into this day. We really appreciate it. So we are in a beautiful space, as you can see, and that is not possible without the support of incredible sponsors. And so we really want to uplift the top sponsors that made today possible. And you'll be seeing some folks in the room that represent our sponsors today. Please thank them. Again, this would not have been possible without their support. So I want to really thank the Grove Foundation, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Pacific Gas and Electric Company. The three of those entities have really helped make this possible through their leadership level gifts. Let's thank them. And so many others have joined us at all levels. And this is the list of sponsors. You're going to be seeing it on a loop today. So just, again, fantastic sponsors. I'm not going to read all of them, but please, let's just take a moment to recognize the range of sponsors in the room. We have philanthropy, we have academia, we have business, we've got so many, and of course our nonprofit partners, so many, and government represented here. So thank you to these sponsors as well. Many of them are in the room today. Thank you. So this is a really important note. I've already let you know who our partners are in terms of the 4 organizations that are working on this for our second annual climate summit. These are the individuals from last year who've been part of the host committee, and we really need to take a moment to especially thank Petra Silton, who really in a lot of ways conceived of this summit to begin with last year, and unfortunately, due to COVID and travels, recent travels, can't be here with us today. Not to put a PSA in there, but it is a reminder for all of us to get our boosters and that it is going to be a tough winter. But I want us to just take a moment to recognize that Petra has made it possible for all of us to be here today, and she is so proud of what has happened and how you have all come together. So let's just take a moment to thank her. And also just take a look at all of the wonderful people on the host committee, Petra, Julio Garcia, Violet and Miriam. We have such a great committee, and all of the individuals there from the Thrive teams, from all of the teams, our AmeriCorps Vistas, so many people to thank today. And hopefully we will get a chance to thank them at the end of the day as well. All right. So summit outcomes, this is really critical to the design of the day. So I want you guys to take a look at the 3 main outcomes we have for you all today. The first one, and this actually informs the design of all the sessions. Our first desired outcome is to build power among community-based organizations that are at the forefront of addressing climate change in the county. So those are the organizations that we've talked about today. Integrate community-led planning into county and city government planning, and then secure ongoing public and private funding for community resilience. Those are our 3 desired outcomes. So I want to go through and actually ask you all to stand up if you represent a certain sector. So if you wear multiple hats, feel free to stand up multiple times or feel free to pick up one. But stand up if you represent nonprofits here today. Great. Awesome. Thank you. Everyone that is here representing the faith community, which we know is so important to this effort, please stand up. Great. Thank you. All of those that are representing government, please stand up. Okay. Nicely dispersed throughout the room, as you can see. All of those that represent philanthropy, please stand up. We've got somebody raising their hand there. A few of them will be on panels today. They're definitely going to get the memo after this session as to the key action items. We have youth represented today. Please stand up. We've heard from our youth already, but would love to see you. And we are going to have a youth session later today. We have members of our community that are, many of them are guests of our community partners here today. Please stand up, members of the community. Okay. All right. Thank you all for being here, and I know there are so many others. I also want to take a moment. We're going to be seeing a wonderful welcome from Congressman Mullen later in the day by video. When we spoke to Congressman Mullen, he told us there was a distinct possibility of a government shutdown, and while that has been averted, he was called back to Washington for a special voting session, a 2-week voting session. He sends his regrets that he can't be here today, but he produced a very special video that we're going to share later with you all. And I'd love for all elected officials to stand. And I'd like to actually also recognize in the back of the room we have South San Francisco represented as well. All elected officials, please stand. Thank you so much for being here today. All right. So on to the call to action. This is something that we're going to be asking you to think about. It's really about commitments. So today's theme is building power for community resilience. And we're doing that in all sorts of ways. We're thinking about that through the lens of planning alongside government and working with our nonprofits. So your call to action is, what will you do to help build power for community resilience in San Mateo County? And today is going to be a wonderful day, but we are going to ask you at the end of the day to actually answer this question. So be thinking about, what will you do to help build power for community resilience in San Mateo County? And you'll have a lot of opportunity today to think about that topic. Okay, so this is the agenda. You have your beautiful agenda in front of you. You can see it's one of the densest agendas you've ever seen. So many amazing speakers are packed into this program. It's going to be hard to decide what to attend, but we will be giving you lots of opportunity to first of all, we're going to have some great opening plenaries here. So we'll be here today for the plenary session, Community Perspectives Across San Mateo County. Then we're going to have a break, and we encourage you to check out the exhibits. If you haven't already, there are exhibitors in there. Coffee is being refreshed. There's breakfast. Then we're going to have our morning breakout sessions. We're going to be walking through those later, but you'll get to choose from funding for community resilience, strategic collaboration and mapping of resources, or community research partnerships and data. So many great ones to choose from. We're going to have a nice luncheon here, a lot of networking opportunities. Plenary session then on community-led planning, and then that is going to be in here as well. And then we are going to have afternoon breakout sessions, youth voice in the local climate movement, nature-based solutions for climate resilience, and resilience hub networks. And then finally, a reflection and closing from Senator Josh Becker here in person. So that, we will be instructing you to make sure you're back in time for that. It's going to be a bit of a tight afternoon. And then there will be networking, hors d'oeuvres, and a cash bar in there for the end of the day. So that's kind of what the day looks like, and just so many great things to choose from. Another thing I want to mention is what's on your table. You've got, obviously, seasonal items like pumpkins. Just know that we will encourage you to take those home if you'd like at the end of the day. So chat amongst yourselves about who gets the pumpkins. And we've got seeds. They're for you to take. Feel free to take those at the end of the day as well. You also have butcher paper on your table because this is supposed to be really interactive. We want to hear from you throughout the day. You're going to get prompts from your facilitators as to how to engage. Crayons, feel free to also doodle because that's fine. Draw while you're listening. We love that as well. So make this fun and interactive and get to know your neighbors as well. Okay. With that, I would love to bring up first our Thrive's Director of Community Resilience, Anna Mascolta, who is going to be leading this awesome opening plenary session, Community Perspectives Across San Mateo County. I need to tell you a little bit about Thrive Rise first. We just launched something called Resilience in Shared Emergencies just last year, and it was in the making for several years, but the idea was that Thrive, San Mateo County did not have an organized effort around what happens in, how do nonprofits organize in the event of a disaster. So obviously the county has a plan for that, but how does the county work with nonprofits? So Thrive launched Resilience in Shared Emergencies, which as we know is ever more critical these days. Anna Mascolta leads that at Thrive, and we're so happy to have her with us, and we're thrilled to have her leading our opening plenary session today. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Georgia. If you're interested in learning more about Thrive Rise, please come up to me at lunchtime or at the networking session. I'm filling in for my colleague Petra Silton today, who can't be here due to unfortunate circumstances, but I'm so excited to be facilitating this session. I'd like to invite onto the stage our three executive directors of the Planning Committee, Violet Wolfsaena from Climate Resilient Communities. Round of applause. Miriam Yupanqui, Nuestra Casa. And Julio Garcia, by South City. These three organizations, you'll hear a lot about them throughout the day, but they do some of the most impactful climate adaptation work in San Mateo County. So again, Petra's loss is my win. I get to be up here with three people that I admire so much. And I think the point of this panel is to have a discussion not just about the work, because we talk about the work a lot, and we do hear about it, but what we don't hear about so much are the people behind the work, and we don't always think about the role that identity and lived experience have in the work that we do. So we're here today to learn a little bit more about the individuals behind the great climate work in San Mateo County. Now, Miriam, I want to start with you. You are from East Palo Alto. You grew up there, and now you lead an organization that does some amazing environmental justice work, climate adaptation work, right back where you grew up. Can you tell us a little bit potentially about what inspired you to go back to where you're from and do this amazing work?
Thank you, Anna, for that introduction. As Anna mentioned, I'm Miriam Yupanqui, Executive Director of Nuestra Casa. And growing up in East Palo Alto, I was always aware of the multiple challenges confronting our community, such as lack of education and economic opportunities. However, I was less aware of the environmental challenges. And it wasn't until my family experienced the 1998 El Nino flooding incident that I was able to question more about the city's infrastructure. So it was a typical early morning, and I got up early to go to high school at Carmont, and I realized that there was a huge storm and no one was on the street. However, I still waited for the school bus for half an hour, and it never showed up. And for me, I was just confused. I never received notification from the school or from the city to let me know what was going on. And it wasn't until later that I realized that several parts of the community were flooding. So at Nuestra Casa, it wasn't until years later that through my work at Nuestra Casa that I was really able to delve more into environmental justice and just question a lot of the city's infrastructure and injustices.
Thank you, Miriam. And Violet, you kind of, on the other hand, you have done so much international work. So you're from Samoa, and you've also done work way beyond Samoa as well in the Pacific Islands, and now you're working in San Mateo County. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here?
I will probably need 2 hours to respond to that. It's a long journey to get here. But I think for my journey, just after listening to Miriam, my story started as a teenager when I first experienced my first cyclone or hurricane, and I was 15 years old in 1990. A Category 4 cyclone hit Samoa. And, imagine experiencing that for the first time. There were some excitement first, and then you started seeing things flying around roof, passing through your home. And it's after the cyclones that really affected me, seeing the desperation and how it impacts people's lives. And also from that earlier on, I also observe that it's the people that have the less resources were the ones that took longer to respond or longer to rebuild. And in Samoa, of course, that was 1990. In December, my second cyclone was less than a year. 1991 Cyclone Val, it was even stronger than Ofa. And it became very intense. And with that second cyclone, people's lives were lost. So that lived experience really changed my path. I think for me it was mostly to see how I can help restore ecosystems, conserve and protect. But then I got into the climate change work back with the government of Samoa as Samoa's first climate change officer, and did a lot of planning, implementing adaptation strategies before I migrated here. So fast forward to now, why I'm still doing this work and why I'm still here, because when I migrated, I moved to East Palo Alto. I don't know if that was fate, but even those very few months that I lived there, I found myself connected to the community. And when I went back to school and studied climate change and vulnerabilities, I wanted to focus my research on East Palo Alto because it relates to me. And I was very surprised to see the similarities, from a country, a small island state, limited resources that are at the front line of climate change and sea level rise. I find the same issues in East Palo Alto at that time. Under-resourced, lack of information, communities that were very vulnerable, didn't know exactly how to get resources or information, just like Miriam's experience. That still exists today, even though we have this collaboration and partnerships working on the ground with our communities and community leaders. Many of them are here. We still have a long fight to go, and that's why I'm still in this work.
Violet, I see you drawing some comparisons between your experience in Samoa and East Palo Alto, and you were 15 years old when you experienced your first cyclone. How has that influenced how you engage with youth in East Palo Alto? Because they're a big part of your work.
Yes, they are. I believe, like engaging, for me, I learned it in a hard way, right, through my lived experiences. I don't know if many of the youths that I work with in East Palo Alto have experienced a Category 5 or Category 4 cyclone. But there are many other challenges. The one thing, I'm very grateful to our youth who spoke to us this morning, and I'm still overwhelmed with his words, was that because many times when I look at climate change, when we are addressing climate change, adapting to climate change and being resilient depends on our ability to respond. And I think if we don't build that, if our youth are not equipped or if we are not listening to their concerns, and many times, the communities that we served here, our frontline communities also have faced many challenges already. The marginalization, the red line, you name it, they have it. And so we have that, we have to overcome those things to be able to be able to respond or plan. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing, is addressing those existing social issues, economic issues, environmental issues. Then we can, take a small breath and, okay, now let's deal with sea level rise. Climate change and sea level rise is an added burden to what our youth are already experiencing now. So I would like to keep engaging them.
Thank you. Now, speaking of layers of burden, Julio, I'm coming to you. You experienced two distinct disasters as a child, right? You experienced the earthquake in Guatemala in 1976 in the midst of a civil war. And when you came to San Mateo County, what you experienced in Redwood City was actually much more of the catalyst for what got you engaged in environmental justice, in immigration reform. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience upon first moving to this community?
Thank you. First, I want to welcome everyone to South San Francisco. This is Rice, South City hometown. And we're glad to see you here. So it's a beautiful city. But just talking about my experience, two things that relates to me. Social justice and environmental justice are two things that are related together. I came from a country that we had a civil war for over 40 years, and we're still going on out there. It's a lot of issues that we have in Guatemala, not only in Guatemala, but in all Central America and Mexico. And coming here is like, San Mateo County, monolingual, no documents, an immigrant with nothing right here. And you see again that is a deja vu, because I experienced all this in Guatemala. I mean, lack of information, lack of resources. And I keep relating those issues to social justice, and that's what I got involved in the immigrant reform and, just residence for everybody. And I suffered. I didn't have a social security. I didn't have a place to work. I needed to work under the table for a long, long time until I got my documents. I learned English in this country, and still, I struggle with English as my second language. So imagine coming to a country that you don't have information. You don't know what's going on. The emergency systems are in English. We don't have emergency systems that translate to Spanish or what's going on. The lack of information that we have about putting diseases to climate change. We don't have it there. So that's one of the reasons that we are here at this stage, to start bringing all these resources for our communities.
Julio, can you tell us a little bit about what Rice South City does and how your experience translates into the programs and the work that you've built in your organization?
Well, we work with promotoras, and we are working with residents of South San Francisco. The first thing that, when we came to this city is that, we just talk to leaders. And one of the leaders is out there, one of them is Eddie Flores, who is the district representative for the city. And we engage Eddie and we engage other members of the community to see what the issues were right here in South San Francisco. And little by little, we're finding out that, by information and research, that South San Francisco has one of the worst air qualities in California. And we start pushing that now we have air monitors in some houses. And we want to install more air monitors right here. Colma Creek is just around here. If you have a break, and when the break is, you can look at Colma Creek. So we have partnership to restoring Colma Creek. But we work with communities. We provide information to communities, whatever the information it is, even if it's not related to climate change, but because we have the duty to inform the community. We have the ears to listen to our communities.
Thank you, Julio. Miriam, you and I have been talking about how climate is just one of many different community priorities. How does Nuestra Casa balance all of these potentially competing priorities in your programs? How do you do that work all at once?
Thank you, Anna, for that question. And I will provide some background in terms of the environmental justice work at Nuestra Casa. So our work in environmental justice began slightly over 4 years ago, and we participated in a project supported by SF Estuary and participated in a community needs assessment project to learn more about the challenges confronting the East Palo Alto community. To no one's surprise, the survey results revealed that the top concern was housing affordability, and the number 2 concern for East Palo Alto residents was water quality. It was then and there that we decided that we needed to do something about this. And for that reason, we developed and launched an Environmental Justice Parent Academy that is really focused on training local parents and youth in environmental challenges such as flooding, sea level rise, air quality, water quality. Our work in environmental justice has evolved since then, and now we have a team that is specifically focused on water justice. And we also participate in important community engagement projects through the Safer Bay Project, and to look into nature-based solutions and protective barriers that will prevent the city from flooding. So in Nuestra Casa, in addition to environmental justice, we do housing advocacy. We have a promotora program that is comprised of community leaders focused on advocacy efforts. We have a food rescue program, and we do a lot. So at the end of the day, we really focused on listening to our community members and letting them let us know what we should focus on. And for Nuestra Casa, we focus on 4 areas. However, just most recently, our work in environmental justice is really gaining lots of visibility because we hear a lot from concerned community members, and our purpose is to help elevate their voices to make sure that they're represented.
Thank you, Miriam. We have one last question that I'd like to open it up to all of you. What is the benefit of having a climate summit like this? What is the benefit of bringing so many different people into one room? And what do you hope will come of an event like this?
I'll go for it first, and then I'll pass it on to Julio. For climate resilient communities work, it was all about elevating community voices. It's about bringing communities together, build collaboration and partnership so that they can advocate or they can shout out to the world or to the county or to the state how vulnerable communities are. it's very hard to do that when people are working in silos, people are working on their own small project or one community. But CRC was always about building collaborations and partnerships, and many people here know about our framework of our climate change community teams that we build in each city that we serve. To your question about today, I think it's always important to bring people together. You may come here for the summit, but I hope that you will leave with something more, with a new partnership, a new friend, a new contact. So because each of us play a key role in building or to adapt to climate change and sea level rise, it doesn't need just the 4 organizations that you see here. It needs everybody. And if we can, use this opportunity of this summit to share the best practices that we have done, or show how collaboration and partnerships, what we can do together as 4 organizations, I hope that's the message that people will take from today.
Thank you. We do have to move on to the next part of the program, so give another round of applause to these 3 panelists. Catch them at lunchtime, catch them at networking hour at 4:30 to learn more about them and more about their organizations. Next up, we have a panel facilitated by Violet, so I will pass it on to you. Thank you.
No, just leave it there. Thank you. Hello? Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm on. All right. It is my pleasure to facilitate this next panel, and I would like to invite my 3 panelists, the 3 guests. First, Pastor Virches. Pastor Virches is from St. Mark AME Zion Church in East Palo Alto. I would also now call Craig Castro, if you can have you back. Craig is the culture director from the Association of Ramaytush and Oleone. And lastly, Dr. Belinda Hernandez Arriaga from ALAS, founder and executive director of ALAS. Please come on. You can choose your chair. I'll sit right here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's okay. I'll sit next. Maybe. Yes, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. So working in this space around climate change and sea level rise and the opportunities and what we have to do to build resilience, it is the hope of this panel to share some perspectives from our other key community leaders and other partners in this work about how they go about building resilience, and also opportunity for them to share some of the barriers that they face, as well as some big wins and how they are building this from the ground up. So I would like to start our panel. So the formation I'm going to ask a few questions to our panelists this morning, and then we will have an opportunity for some Q&A questions from the audience. And then we also have a table exercise following the panel. So maybe I'll start from Pastor Virches. Question for everyone here. If you can please tell us a little bit about yourself. Sorry that I didn't give your bios, but I would like for you to do that. A little bit about yourself, the community you are representing, and we would also like to hear the journey that got you to this role in the community.
First and foremost, I am really thrilled to be here this morning. I attended the summit last year, and one of the things that I noticed that I felt was missing was representation for the faith community. So I am the Reverend Deborah Lewis Burgess. I am the pastor of St. Mark AME Zion Church in East Palo Alto. I'm an ordained elder in the AME Zion Church, also known as the Freedom Church. So it is by divine inspiration that I sit here today to represent some of the views of the faith community. For me, being involved in environmental justice and climate matters was simply a matter of moral responsibility. I see first, we had a friend up a little bit earlier right here next to me, and he spoke about the land and how his people had basically stewarded and kept the land. But I think it's imperative that we remember that God created the earth. The earth belongs to God as far as I'm concerned. That's what my faith teaches me. And God has challenged us all to be stewards of all of his creation. That includes his planet as well as his people. And for me, I have discovered that wherever there are people, we generally have problems with disparities. So for me, my journey really began by divine inspiration, as I said, to be a voice for those who could not unite our faith with what was going on in the environment. So I'm here today to hopefully represent some of those views. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Richards. Right?
And I want to go off of what you said, because that's our belief. We've had that belief for 15,000 years. I was just thinking earlier, the previous panel talking about coming into a land that they're not familiar with, and language differences, and that's our. When people think of language, they think of they can just create a word list. In our language, my father's language, Hispanican, is thank you. So you just write that down equals thank you. It's much more complicated than that, because language, especially for indigenous languages that are 15,000 years old, they represent an entirely different frame of mind. It's hard to translate, and it's hard to convey those concepts in English. I mean, for me, growing up with English is still one of the barriers we have, because I'm trying to convey some of our ancient thoughts and philosophies in this crude new language that we call English. And one of them is that concept you're talking about. We have these words that we are talking about nowadays, land back, right? That's really popular right now. It's not happening all that frequently, despite all the PR. But land back to us is kind of an odd thing, because how can you exchange land? To us, it's not a tool. That's what contemporary society treats land as a tool, an object to be manipulated. To us, it's our relative, it's our mother, it's where we came from. It's what makes us, right? So in my dad's Salinan people, south of the Ohlone, down in Monterey County, at our sacred mountain, that's now part of a national forest, our stories tell us that we were brought into the world at the base of that mountain. And the first people, the people who formed the world after the flood, the disaster at that time, with powers given them by Creator, they then, after formed the world and got it all set up close to what we see now, minus the concrete and buildings, then they were told that they need to prepare the world for the next people coming. The two-footers, that's us. And when we showed up, we came in the form of elderberry. That's what this is. It's a branch, a plant that grows abundantly, at least it did back in the day. And we use these for many different purposes, for an elixir, for medicine purposes, and to make these instrument, which is the main for most California people. But our stories tell us we're actually made of elderberry. So we are of the land, and the land is of us. It's within us, and we carry our homeland with us wherever we go. Now, if you were to go home and tell your mom, I own you, she's probably going to throw a frying pan at you. So we don't do that. Earth is our mother. It's a relative. And everything, part of it, because everything comes from the earth, and the water is the blood that connects the body of that earth, then we're all relatives. And that extends to the plants and trees and other things. Sunday I was at the Edgewood Preserve on the other side of the hill, and we were talking about this, and I asked the people there, so like, you might be too embarrassed to raise your hand, but how many of you walk around the trails and talk to the plants, animals, and trees? Yes, that's what happened. Like 80% of the people did that, right? That's very indigenous. That's how we approach it. And we really believe that. And when you think like that, the world changes. And your view of it and your interaction, hopefully, will follow along. When you treat it as a relative, rather than a possession to be manipulated, a tool. Now contrast to our world today. And it's why we're in the crisis we are in. Because we don't treat it as a relative with that reverence and respect. The stories also tell us when we came into the world as two-footers, we were the last, right, of living creatures. And if you've ever grown up in a family and you're the youngest, I had 2 older brothers. By the time we showed up, the house, we had a nice house, nice place. We were poor, but we didn't know that because I had a great childhood. Food was on the table. I had to put up with my annoying older brothers, but other than that, life was pretty good. And I was raised to be grateful for that, and understood later on to be grateful for that. Because it's not a given that we should have this world. And that's what we're dealing largely with, that sense of entitlement, of self-service, of narcissism, of selfishness. And those are the foundations of our modern society, right? Because in our culture, there was no such thing as homelessness. No such thing as hunger. Those issues didn't exist. And we lived in a world that we had gratitude for, humility and respect, so we only took what we need. And we often asked permission first. If we went out hunting, we asked permission. And we're grateful for that sacrifice. And we understood we're a part of that system. So we're going into the ground that's going to grow plants, that's going to feed that animal we hunt. And the cycle continues. And we only took what we needed. Water, plants, animals, whatever we were using. And when we took something, we utilized it to the best of our capability. If we took an animal, we would use all of it, not just for food and throw the rest away. We'd use the hides, we use the muscles, we use the sinews, we use the bone. That's what this is. It's a rattle. It's a deer hoof rattle, we call it. The femur of a deer. The hoofs. Other parts of it. We used every part of it. And we expressed thanks for that animal sacrifice that nourished us. And we did the same to those plants and animals. When you have that kind of thought, it's a radically different world. And it makes it hard for us to live in this world when you have that understanding.
Thank you very much, Craig, for sharing all of that. Dr. Belinda Arriaga, can you share a little bit about yourself and what got you to be doing this work that you're doing, and share also with our audience what actually that Alice does, please.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be on this panel, and I'm inspired by all of you and everyone here today. Welcome. And I think it's just a reminder of how much we have to treasure, and cherish the land that we're on. And I guess as I'm hearing you talk and share a little bit about Alas, we're in beautiful Half Moon Bay on the coast side. It's a Latino nonprofit that I founded in 2011, and we've grown to be a program that works with mental health, cultural arts, education, advocacy. And today I really want to focus on our farm worker program. So as you're talking about the land, we're thinking about the farm workers we work with that are caring for the land and are exploited in so many different ways and are not valued and are not treasured and are not seen. And one of the things that I've thought about when I go out and we go out to the fields, we go on site, we provide mental health directly on site. We're trying to flip systems for farm workers and quit waiting for them to come to us, but rather go to them because we know they're tending to the land. We're tending there, and so when I've seen them and just talked to them, and we have a lot of elders. We have folks that are 80 years old as farm workers right now in Half Moon Bay, 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds. And you know what? When I go out there, they love what they do. And they are caring for the earth and for our food that we eat in such a respectful way. And one of the things that I've thought so many times is that they are the PhDs of the land, the doctores of the land, the profesores of the land. And we don't give them that credit. You know, it's like we did a documentary and I say, I have my education, but it does not compare in any way to what they hold and what they do and how they should be elevated. And they should have every resource made available to them. They should have the best medical care. They should have the best wages and the best housing. And we are 30 minutes from the most wealthiest, communities of Silicon Valley. And yet here in Half Moon Bay, just where everybody loves to go and pick pumpkins, get Christmas trees, eat Barbara's Fish Trap, and, watch the Maverick waves, we're watching the disparities. And we're seeing the inequities. And we're also seeing farmland drying up because we're not investing in that. We're too busy investing in Silicon Valley, but not investing in those that work for our production of our food, but also that are caring for the land that we have. So I hope today is a call to action for change.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Belinda. I think what I'm hearing with the conversation we're having here, how valuable it is, our lived experiences, the expertise of our community and our residents, and also our ancestral knowledge, right? The knowledge from our ancestors. With climate change challenges and the work that we are engaged in these days, we talk a lot about building resilience. I just came back 2 weeks ago from a White House summit on building resilient communities. A lot of it was, we were talked at with all the support that's coming from the federal government. But, building resilience, what we mean by that, what actually I want to hear from all three of you, like in your line of work, what does that mean for you and your community and your work? We talk about resilience, we talk about being able to adapt, to bounce back. There's a lot of different definitions, but I know it's different if you're dealing with mental health, you're dealing with elderly population. Can you share with us what that looks like?
Yes, I smile when I see this word resilience because when I was doing my doctorate program and we were actually working with, I was focusing on how we heal from the psychological implications of immigration trauma. And what we're doing at ALA's, one of my mentors said to me, because Belinda, you really need to consider that your community is not being resilient, but they're resisting. They're actually being resistant. Because if you're resilient, then you're continuing to thrive within a system that is oppressive or that struggle or that continues to, press us down. And so you're having to thrive within that system. But really, we need to be resistant. And when I thought about that, I was like, that is our community. And I will go down a list of what we've just gone through in the last year. Starting in January, we woke up, I think it was New Year's Eve, and we all went to sleep, and New Year's Day, we woke up with the threat of major flooding. And by January 2nd, our community was really hurting with a really bad flood that we hadn't seen for years. It flooded our our fields, and it flooded in our most vulnerable communities. We were in Moonridge, which is our farm worker housing, with sewer coming out of homes, and our families taking out everything they owned out into, their sidewalks and into their yards. And they were crying, saying, Belinda, we have worked for years to own this of what we have, and we're losing it right now. And yet, at the same time, even in the midst of that, they were rising up to be there together, to stand, to say, how do we help? And in many ways, standing alone because of the complicated structures of what was happening at the time. And so we worked with that community of Moonridge, who has always been standing strong as a predominantly immigrant housing community, farm worker community that has learned to live in many ways in an isolated area, but also thriving with culture, thriving with familia, thriving with tradition, and continuing to go strong. And so then, just like a couple of weeks later, we had the worst mass shooting, of our farm worker community. And when you think about what provoked that, there was a lot of things that you can look at, and one of them was just the really terrible housing conditions, the complicated, life of the farm workers that they were living, and yet they had to go through the flooding, then this, wildfires that we've been through, and the economic struggles that we're going through. And so one of the things that Alice has done too is started a food pantry during COVID. And we thought this was going to open and close, and then we realized now, 3 years later, we have the largest number attending, but the sad thing is that it's our farm workers that are coming for the food. And so we think about, how do we rise up together? And it's for Alas, it's not one person, it's not even our program. It's the community standing together. The very community that uses these services are the very community that's making these services happen. So during the flooding, when we were all trying to go out and give food and try to make sure that farms that couldn't come out, that were stuck, that we were going in, working with World Central Kitchen, our whole community that uses the services said, hey, we're here to stand with you, to work with you, to go out in these conditions. And we also have done recently, in the last year or two, we did several surveys for climate change, and we did this beautiful mural idea where they were able to come and do this workshop. And they talked about, when they came from Mexico, what the climate was like when they arrived. And it was the fog, and it was, a lot of rain, and the cold weather, and they just talked about how it affected them and the farming. But now they've also talked about the change and how they've seen it just changing over time, and what can they do? What can we do on the coast side to make change? So as a Latino community and as farm workers, they're also engaging in conversations amongst ourselves of what we can do to make change. So I think the key for us at Alas and for us on the coast side, as we think about resistance in the way that our Latino community is constantly standing strong in the face of adversity. They're constantly rising up, and what I like to use the word of cultural wealth. And when I say cultural wealth, what I mean is that it's that inborn strength that we all are born with, and sometimes, systems don't recognize inherent leaders. They don't recognize how communities come together for change. They don't recognize the cultural wealth that is already existing within communities. And that sometimes, we put it out ourselves because we get so beaten down with not being able to be seen as the experts or seen as those with the answers. And but they have the answers. Our community have the answers. And so we're going to the people to say, hey, join with us. We're joining with you to lift our voice as a common community, resist together, rise together, and make change in the world.
Thank you very much for that wealth of information and knowledge. I would now like to direct a question directly to Pastor Virgis. This question is for you. Where do you see an intersection between the faith-based community you are deeply rooted in and taking care of the earth and people on the planet?
Thank you so much for the question. Forgive me, but I actually took some notes on this, anticipating that this would perhaps be one of the questions that would be directed to me. So I wanted to be precise in my response. For starters, the faith-based community holds fast to the belief that we are called by God to take care of the earth and each other. Sacred scriptures remind us that we have a moral responsibility to care for the land, as I said earlier, and God's people, but especially the poor. Our failure to do either directly impacts the other. Wherever we find a lack of social and racial justice, we will also find a plethora of environmental injustices. Fewer trees, poor air quality, more toxic dump sites, invasive structures, and gerrymandered freeways plague the less affluent communities. And this breeds unhealthy and unsafe living conditions for many minority and marginalized societies. So righting the societal wrongs is a part of stewardship. Why would we put in our neighbor's yard that which we aren't willing to put in our own backyard? Since God grants us dominion over his creation, we have a right, as my brother has stated, to use what we need from the earth to live. He has also given us the authority to use his creation for food, shelter, and other important aspects, but he has cautioned us against misusing any and all of these resources. Coincidentally, St. Mark is currently embarking upon a study of the book of Jeremiah. And in the book of Jeremiah, we're reminded that God says, I brought you into a fertile land to eat its fruits and rich produce. But you came and defiled my land and made my inheritance detestable. This is a warning to all of us to use the earth well and to treat it as a valuable mark of God's creation as well as his provision. We should remain mindful that when we totally disrespect, destroy, and disregard God's creation and its impact on the least of them, God has a unique way of reminding us of our ill behavior and allows nature to reveal the consequences for our failure to be good stewards of his creation. These are not simply my beliefs and or the beliefs of the AME Zion Church, also known as the Freedom Church, but these are the beliefs of our brothers and sisters in faith across the country who are rallying together to implement earth care programs and to speak out about earth and environmental stewardship and injustices through a host of programs. I believe it was actually Pope Francis who actually said some years ago at one of the Earth Day summits that we need to take charge and care of nature, of the gift that we have received, and that we have to heal, guard, and carry forward so that this very land continues to take care of us. I want to tap, if I may, on the subject of resiliency because you talked about it for a second. I believe that resiliency is simply the ability to apply what is happening, learn from what is happening, and to do what is necessary to prevent it from continuing to happen. And that is something that we have to continue to do. That is something that we find that most folks in marginalized communities have a more difficult time and have more of a challenge in doing because, as it's been said already, we have fewer resources and we have less education on the subject matter. So as an advocate of what I consider climate warfare, because see, it's not just climate advocacy and climate control and things of that nature, it's a warfare. You know, when nature begins to fight back against how we treat it, we need to take heed to that. So I just wanted to share that from a place of passion and say thank you for the opportunity to make my truth known. Amen? Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Regis. I'm going to ask Craig one question, and then I would like to open up for one or two questions from the audience. So, Craig, thinking of your journey advocating for California indigenous communities and curriculum development to continue teaching about culture, what have been lessons learned? What are your goals for future of resilience for California indigenous communities?
How many hours we got?
That was 2 questions. I'm sorry.
Well, as I think I said earlier, one of the issues is English, and it's not just merely translation, but thought translation, not just word translation. As I said earlier, we think of everything we are on as alive, and as you indicated, Mother Earth is kind of upset right now. And one thing that I learned early on from elders is that, we have this sacred obligation given to us as the two-footers to take care of our relatives, right? As I said earlier, we're the youngest of this family, and that's often the role of the youngest is to take care of the elders. That's part of our culture as well. And we're not doing a great job the last 250 years here in California. We did great for 10,000 years, but, sometimes Mother Earth's memory is a little short. And the last 250 years, the new two-footers have come in and created this society that treats Mother Earth as tools and people as tools, right? People like our farm workers who have our earth in the soil and have this knowledge, which is indigenous, even though we don't call it that, but it's indigenous. And we treat them as tools, as cannon fodder, because the wealth that we must have in this societal thought pattern is on the other side of the hill, on this side. And I experienced both. As I said, I worked at the orchards down in San Jose area when I was a kid, and saw those orchards disappear, be paved over, and this new society paved over and built upon. And I worked in that structure for 50 years. I had a tech job in Silicon Valley. And I understand being a tool in that system and how dehumanizing it is. How do we get that idea that I grew up with from my own family and later on from elders to translate? And it's, part of it is that I'm up here sort of preaching. And that's also not our way. We don't tell people what to think. We grow up in social structures, village social structures, where people had this communicated to them every day by example, by subtle ways, but continuous ways. And we came up with an ethic and moral structure and a family structure where that was embedded from the beginning. So it wasn't hard to remind people through our stories, through songs, through ceremony, our place in the world, and to be humble and grateful for it. And that's a way different attitude that we live in today. And it's hard to translate that. And if you have a conversation with people, and that's only happened recently where I've sat in audiences like this and have people nodding their heads up and down instead of side to side, because it was totally alien to them, what I was talking about. But here is an audience, and I haven't experienced that often, that we have people that understand that. But it's still out there in the world, and the foundations of the society we live in don't have that embedded in it. They have other thoughts of the world and everything in it as being tools to be manipulated and to extract resources and wealth from it, and it only goes in certain directions. So how do we get beyond that? Well, in my culture, you start with yourself. You reflect inward. Again, that's not part of this society. So we just got to keep saying it. look at yourselves. Look at the things you do, right? All of us do. I mean, I have to get mad at my own family because they keep buying, plastic bottles of water because it's convenient. They're, even my grandkids are teenagers. They're running out of the house. They grab a thing of water because it's convenient. And not only is it destructive to the environment, but they also complain about, the price of gas. And I keep telling them, the water you're buying is more expensive than the gas you're putting in your car that you're complaining about, right? So what's that say about water? The most precious resource we have is being completely wasted. Don't get me started on water. Food too, but water is the big one. The way it's manipulated as a tool is horrible. And that's where we start, looking at ourselves, looking at what we do as individuals, then as a community, and then hopefully that will translate into a change in our society, hopefully before it's too late.
Thank you. Please, a round of applause for our speakers. I have time for just one question, and I'll be happy to take one question from our audience today. Does anyone has any burning question to ask our panelists? Going once? Okay, I see a hand. Ever, yes, another great leader in our midst. Please.
Good morning, and thank you for your presence and your time. So as you speak, each from your own perspective and the communities you serve, I am wondering how can these different groups create such a synergy for collaboration? Because sometimes I often feel like we are working from separate silos that, don't allow us to make progress faster. And, it sounds like most of our groups are in correlation with nature. We are realizing, the deep hole that we have dug for ourselves. So I would be very interested in hearing, what paths for collaboration do you see among the different groups that you serve? Thank you.
Thank you, Ever. Does anyone?
I'd like to. Yes, actually I would. Excuse me, but this is actually a plug for CRC. I would like to say sincerely that one of the reasons that I got highly involved in the East Palo Alto community with environmental justice advocacy was because of the leadership that I discovered with CRC. And at that time, I believe Violet was with Actara and things of that nature. And there's also a community group in the community, the community climate change team, right? And what we find even with summits such as this, these are our opportunities. This is where we all come together to collaborate, to find out what others are doing and to see where we can join in. But specifically, again, I'd like to go back to CRC, as I said. Since I've been involved with the organization, I have always discovered it to be collaborative by design and intentionally and deliberately bringing different groups together so that we can do things together. All of our projects involve others. Even when grants and things are written, community partners are built into that infrastructure. And we're all allowed to come together and to offer our different gifts and talents for the common good. So I think it's with groups such as CRC and the summits that we're experiencing right now.
Thank you.
I think it's important for us to kind of do a reality check of where we are and how we got here. And in the way I put it, and I use the word siloed, we are, but what does siloed mean? And in this case, to me, looking out at the social landscape, there's many holes that have been dug and we've been tossed into them. And we're all climbing out of them. Now, there's a desperation behind that for survival, but there's also a desperation that we can't take the time to really reflect on that the way we should, because we're desperate for survival, especially in this climate calamity. But, sometimes we can just maybe write a note wrap it around a rock and toss it out of the hole and see who else gets it. That's how I feel as an indigenous person, because we've only been popular for the last maybe 5 years, especially in this area. And now we're being overwhelmed with contact. We're a victim of our own success, but we still need to have the resources to do that, to make those connections. And we're doing that, but it's the need is overwhelming and the response is overwhelming. So be patient, especially if you're sending me emails.
Belinda, you want to respond?
Well, I just think that we need to make climate change a part of everything that everyone's doing, right? So it needs to be a part of the fabric of every conversation in terms of programming and design. I mean, Alas is a good example of that. We were never focused on climate change. We were doing social services, mental health, education, working with our farm workers, but quickly we said, hey, we need to be a part of this. This needs to be part of the fabric of what we're doing. And then I think opportunities like this to come together to share in our meetings, in our networking, and just with our hearts, right? What are we doing, and telling the story of what we're doing. Today, hearing both of you, and of course you, Violet, hearing the stories, it re-inspires us to say, hey, we're in this together. None of us are alone, and all of you here today are here for that purpose. So I think we need to celebrate. We are climbing out, and let's climb together.
Thank you. Well, sad to say we have run out of time. Please give another applause for my prestige panelists for their wisdom. Thank you very much. For their wisdom and time, and for sharing their expertise. Thank you very much, Pastor Burgess. Okay, wow. I wish I had 30 more minutes with these amazing individuals. But next on our agenda, or for our time, we now have about 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes. I hope we'll be able to have you engage at your table. I know that once you sat down, you spend a lot of time looking up here, but I'd like for you to take this moment and look around your table, introduce yourself, get to know each other at the table, hopefully make those connections. And then we have a question. There are also papers and pens if you want to discuss any takeaways from the panel that just completed, or even since the beginning, as well as the amazing poems that were shared by our youth this morning. So thank you again. Please enjoy that time with your neighbors at your table. And write anything. There is a white paper on your table. If you want to share our team, we'll collect those at the end of the summit, and we hope that we can document those thoughts. Thank you again. Faftaita Lelava.